Welcome to Circle Sanctuary Network Podcasts, brought to you by Circle Sanctuary, one of the oldest nature spirituality churches in the United States, connecting people of nature-centered paths around the world. Join us through the week for a variety of shows discussing various topics, celebrating the divine in all of its forms, through nature worship, rituals, education, and building bridges of community.
Good evening, good morning, good night, good second breakfast, whenever you are, wherever you are. My name is Laura Gonzalez, and I'd like to welcome you to Lunatic Mondays, Lunes, Lunáticos, the very first bilingual show for CSNP, the Circle Sanctuary Network podcast. And you know it's the first because there are two. The second bilingual show is on Saturdays, and it's called Paganos del Mundo, and it's on Spanish and Portuguese. So if you want to be bilingual, trilingual, or a polyglot, listen to CSNP. There's something for everyone. And tonight I am so excited. I'm so excited to interview this author because my goodness, she really knocked it out of the park with this book, which is Heretics and Warrior Woman. Phoenix LeFae is a professional tarot reader, root worker, teacher, and ritualist. She has been practicing witchcraft for almost 30 years, and her teachings are connected to the reclaiming tradition, Druidry, and Garnerian Wiccan. She's also owner of an esoteric goddess shop called Milk and Honey, and you can visit her at www.phoenixlefae.com. And I'd like to welcome you to Lunatic Mondays. How are you?
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm good. It's a beautiful day in California today.
It is beautiful. And for those who don't know, we are pre-recording. We're not going to tell you when we're pre-recording, but you are listening to us live because we are live. And we are celebrating, commemorating and honoring Women's History Month. And when I got the call from Llewellyn and I saw, all I needed was to see the cover of this book, which is Heretics and Warrior Woman. And I'm like, yeah, that one. I want to interview that person. I don't know who wrote it. I don't know who they are, but you know, this has to be for Women's Month. So I'm very pleased that you say yes. And the very first thing that I'm going to ask you is, how do you identify as a witch?
Yes, as a witch. Yeah, you know what's funny is that title has shifted over the years, you know, because I started practicing in the mid-90s. And I went by witch, and then that translated to pagan. And then when I was in the corporate world, because I live in a pretty progressive part of Northern California, I could be out as a Wiccan, and that was okay. People were like, oh, Wiccan, yeah, I know what that is. And now I'm like, no, I think I'm a witch.
That's beautiful. And the first thing that I am delighted to get to know you via this interview. People always ask me, you know, like, why do you interview so many people? So I can get to know them and interview them and then learn whatever didn't make the book. We're going to extract it from you today. But how did you get into this path of witchcraft?
Yeah, so I wasn't raised religious. I don't really have a religious background. We didn't go to church or anything like that. So in my early teens, I had my heart broken for the first time, as many of us do as teenagers. And I was just so lost and devastated and sick. It was a really difficult part of my life. And my 15-year-old self thought, well, if I had religion, maybe this would be easier. So I started exploring, and my dear friend was Catholic, and there was a Catholic church across the street. So I would go with her, and I loved all the like touching the holy water and the genuflecting. And I loved all of this pomp and circumstance, but the old dude standing at the podium talking about stuff then I was like lost and bored. And I started reading books about Buddhism and Taoism and Islam, and I just didn't find anything that struck a chord where my heart was like, oh, this is it. And then one day I was in a bookstore and I picked up a book about witchcraft, and it was Raymond Buckland's big book of witchcraft, the big blue book. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I already believe, and other people have practices around it, and other people are doing this, and that was it. I read everything I could get my hands on. I started going to public ritual, and then I've been blessed and lucky to dabble in different traditions over the years, but that was it. One book in my soul searching for religion. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I really like everything that you have in this book. And I'm so eager to get into the book, but I want to get a little bit more of your background.
Yeah.
How did your family, you say you didn't grow up in a religious family complexity, but how culturally, how do you integrate all this freedom and all this practices into your life?
Yeah, well, you know what? As a teenager, I was given a lot of free reign to explore things. So I'm pretty lucky in that regard. And my parents are divorced and live in different states. And my dad was super into it. And he's the far away parent, right? So he thought it was neat. He started doing some exploration on his own. He got really into some, what I might refer to as shamanic, even though I know that's a complicated term. But he started his own exploration that kind of was spurned from what I was doing. My mom, who I lived with, was not quite as keen. She thought it was interesting. She liked the woman empowerment aspect of witchcraft. And she was mostly okay with it until the tarot cards came into the house. And then she was kind of freaked out. And I think, honestly, she just thought it was a phase and I would get over it and I would figure out who I was. And this was just part of my exploration. And now, I run a witchcraft shop and I'm basically a full-time witch and I'm very out and open about it. I write books. So it's a very long phase. It's a phase. I did get a little bit of blowback from community, but like I said, I live in a pretty progressive area, but I was reading a book in my science class in high school. And my science teacher walked by and said, "Oh, what are you reading?" And I showed him and he was like, "Oh, you shouldn't be reading that. That's the devil. That's bad for you." Blah, all of that stuff. So over the years, there's been, a little bit of that, but mostly it's been pretty accepting from the people in my life. And the more I practice and the more I'm around other witches. So now I kind of take it for granted that there are so many witches in the world. And I know that's not true for everyone. And I live in a very special little bubble, but I am surrounded by magical people who are into magical things, whether that's witchcraft or something else. So I'm very lucky. I recognize that.
So something that struck me by reading this book is the importance that you put in it to be diverse and to be inclusive and to be accepting and embracing of every person, genders, body sizes, and especially, the diversity that we live in this 2020s. But is that something you grew up with, or is that a taste that you acquire?
That's a really interesting question. It's something I grew up with. So my stepfather is African-American. And he's, 6'8". So he's an imposing man and we live in the white suburbs. So, I was living a different life than most of my friends. I grew up with a different awareness of what it was like to be a person of color. I watched some things that he went through that if I hadn't been raised by a Black man, I never would have experienced. So, so it was like, my eyes were open to the bullshittery of white supremacy at a very, very young age. And over the years, because I am a white girl, people think I'm one of the quote unquote safe white people that they can say shitty things to. And I have called many a douchebag to the carpet with inappropriate things. So, when my parents first got divorced, actually, my mom's best friend moved in with us and she's a Black woman and her 3 Black children. So like I said, from a very young age, I've had a different perspective. My mom's always had queer friends. We've had different variations of people of color in our household. So I am also very grateful for that because I wouldn't have had that experience if my mom hadn't been so open herself. And then my first husband is Native American, my daughter's Native American. So I've had the blessing of being exposed to a lot of cultures beyond my whiteness, which just, it really is a blessing. It really, really is a blessing.
And as a person of color myself, I'm a Mexican immigrant. I'm originally from Mexico City. I'm indigenous myself.
Nice.
I'll have to say that everything that comes on your background, you can see it on the book.
Good. Oh,
And
thank you.
yeah, and I was really, really curious about it, but I didn't want to ask, you know, like how ethnically diverse are you? But you know, this is wonderful, and I thank your mama, and I thank your big old tall stepdaddy and everybody, because man, oh man, that's it. I'm gonna get into the book. I just can't wait.
Do it.
Yeah, Witches and Heretics were Witches, Heretics and Warrior Woman. Heretics or Heretics? How do you pronounce it?
Heretics. Yeah, you're right.
Heretics.
Heretics.
Okay. And I love, and I want you to speak on.
Yeah.
Diversity is key for this book. Know thyself is key for this book.
Yes.
And yet you made a point very early in the book. I'm going to talk about women and girls, and I'm going to talk about feminine. How important is that we bring that dialogue forefront? That yes, we are diverse. However, we're going to talk about women.
Yeah.
How important is that, and how do you manage to do it so graciously?
Oh, well, thank you. You know, it's a tricky conversation, because I want men, queer folks, people of all gender spectrums to be able to find something in this book. But my lived experience is as a cis woman. So I can't really write about what it is to be gender fluid. I can't write about what it is to be trans. I can't write about these lived experiences that aren't my own. But I can write about what it's like to be a cis woman in our culture and in our world right now. And it's still problematic. Even cis women do not have the equality that we should. And I know it gets even harder the more outside the norms you are, the perceived cultural norms, the overcultural norms. So I know that there are definitely people that are facing harder injustices than I am, but I can't write about those perspectives. I can really only write about my own. And I do think it's important that as women, we continue to have those conversations, be inclusive of the spectrum, but still talk about what it's like to be a woman and what it's like to have the lived experiences we're having.
Mm-hmm. I love how you touch on that, and how I mean, everything that I'm very pleased to see that the person reflects the book and the book reflects the person, because
Thank
I was
you.
just dying to get to know you better. And you also talk on this book, and we're going to start talking more about the book, so hold on. But I gotta get my emotions out first, people. You know that Lunatic Mondays, anything can happen. I'm excited. This is Women's Month. You're here because you love it. You know you do. You talk a lot about body diversity, and that is my wheelhouse. As a big woman, as a fat woman, I do have, right, a lot of the complexities of this intersectionality that we talk about on activism and feminism. But one of the ones that I get more discrimination and judgment towards is for my size, right?
Right.
For being a fat woman.
Right.
And you so earnestly talk about move your body.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be this, that, or the other. I noticed here that you also wrote another book about loving your body and stuff like that. So talk to us a little bit. You being the embracing or living, the norm and this hegemonical, systematical beauty standard.
Yeah.
How can you dab into that? How can you so nicely do it?
Yeah, we are all influenced and impacted by the beauty standards of our culture, right? Even if we don't subscribe to them as individuals, we are still impacted by them. Social media makes it even more constantly in our face, all of the supposed tos and shoulds and all of that crap, right? So going back to childhood, we are all, that is in our faces all the time, and it's utter crap. It's utter crap, because the images we see are curated, they're lies, and yet we just eat them up like they're delicious pudding. It's nuts. So I am a big proponent, like you only get this body. What you have now is what you have. And you might want it to perform differently. You might want it to look differently. You might want it to have this other thing. And then that could be health, weight, color, it could be anything. You might desire something else, but this is what you have. And so at some point, we have to find our peace with that. In order to feel more whole and have more joy and happiness, we have to come to terms with what we have right now. And I say that like it's just easy, just forget all your cultural programming. I know it's not that easy, but this one amazing human body is all we get. And everyone's working with something. So if you are in a wheelchair, if you are disabled in some way, if you can't get up and dance and shake your booty in the living room, find a way where you can at least engage and move somehow, right? Work with what you've got. It doesn't have to be the overculture's concept. It can be what you've got right now. And so, again, I can only speak from my lived experience, but I know that there is a wide range of bodies and they are all freaking amazing. Like every human is literally a miracle. Like every human is a miracle. And it just breaks my heart to think someone is so tied up in looking or being someone else. Like, why? You are a miracle, you as an individual. And so I just really want, like, that is the message I want to spread to the world. Like, you are amazing, celebrate you, whatever that looks like.
And of course, with that, we can, and I need to put on my glasses, I hate it. Walking in Beauty, using the magic of the pentacle to bring harmony to your life.
Yeah.
That was published in 2020 by Llewellyn as well, by Phoenix. And, it is important that we remember that we want to move our body because we love our body and we want our body to continue moving, and not because we hate it, and that all
Absolutely.
that struck a chord, so hard with me. And what I always tell young witches or non-witches, women or femmes or people, whoever listen, don't wait until you're 40.
Right.
Don't wait until you're 35,
Right.
Do it now.
Right.
Love it now and know that this is it. It's not gonna be different. And we never question someone that is too tall and tell them like, oh, why are you so tall? You shouldn't be so tall. Or someone that is balding, like, hey, do you think it's bad that you're balding? Like, we don't do that. So why we do that to fat bodies or diverse bodies?
And I think, you say don't wait till you're 40. I think it gets easier the older you get. I'm turning 44 in exactly a month, exactly a month. And I could give a whole lot less about what other people think than I did 20 years ago. And if I could go back in time and say to my 24-year-old self, you're wasting your time and energy worrying about what other people think. Just be you. Like if I could have that wisdom at 24, what a lot of time I would have, and heartache I would have saved myself, So I do think it gets easier with age, but for the younger folks who are listening, like learn that freaking wisdom now.
Yeah.
Right.
And try to embrace it. And I know it feels probably weird that you have a 48-year-old and a soon to be 44-year-old telling you like, don't wait, but really don't wait.
Yeah.
Because
life is short.
And it's not gonna get easier. It's a working everyday thing. So the sooner you start working on it, the better. And this whole pandemic and all of that has taught us that it could be gone in an instant. So Absolutely. You might as well. So you wrote 2 books during the pandemic.
3, actually. I co-wrote another book called Life Ritualized.
Wow. how much from what you planned for Witches, Heretics, and Warrior Woman change from what you have planned to what you actually wrote because of
Well,
pandemic?
I think I stayed on task pretty good. I had a whole prologue that I had to cut, but I had a whole prologue that talked about writing a book during COVID and writing a book during the Black Lives Matter like explosion part of the movement, where it was like every day more and more was happening. I really wanted to address like how much that was impacting my awareness and where my headspace was, but I had to cut that. So I think that's the one thing that I'm like, oh,
You can talk to us about it here.
Well, you kind of said it a moment ago, like the pandemic has really shown us the fragility of life, the fragility of our communities, right? And not just like my little town, but the globe, right? What happens somewhere else on the planet 100% will have an impact on me in some way, shape, or form, and how we are so connected and so reliant on each other. And I think, this is definitely an American issue. This like, do it yourself, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You can only depend on yourself. That's a lie. Like, that's an utter lie. Most of us don't grow our own food and we're not off the grid. Like, we depend on other people to keep our lives moving. And the pandemic has shown us that, right?
Yeah.
And then the Black Lives Matter movement, I feel, is one of the most important things to happen outside of the pandemic, including the pandemic in the last few years. I watched so many white people wake up, and I was like, holy crap, I never thought that would happen. I never imagined so many folks, and there's still a lot of folks that need to wake up. Like, I'm not saying the work is done, not by a freaking long shot, but I was surprised. I was honestly surprised to see folks that I never thought would get it all of a sudden starting to get it. And that was powerful. That was really powerful.
Do you think that now that you mentioned that this is a problem in the United States, do you think it's more prevalent on white folks that they don't see themselves as part of a community? That is all this individualism? Because people of color, indigenous people, Black people, Latinx people, Mexicans, or whatever, we rely so much on community, and we rely so much on like the neighbor and I watch your kids or whatever. Why is that so difficult to observe on white communities?
It's this like rugged individualism, that like don't take a handout, you have to do it yourself. Like anyone can be successful, which is also like, no. You're more likely to be rich and successful if your family is rich and successful, so it's this American idealism that you can make it happen, but you can only rely on yourself, and it's just fundamentally false. No one just relies on themselves, even if they think they are. That's like, do you go to the grocery store? Then you're not relying on yourself,
Yeah, exactly.
And I think because of white Americans that we are disconnected from the land, right?
Yeah.
We have no relationship to the land. And that is a problem, because if you don't have a relationship with something, you don't care about it. You're willing to take advantage of it. You're willing to abuse it. If you care about something, you will defend it. You will protect it. And I think that culturally, right? I know like a lot of witches and pagans are like, I'm not like that. And I get that. But culturally, we are very disconnected from the land we live on. And that's a huge issue.
Which is also so paradoxical, because the majority of the United States is rural.
Right.
Because coming from Mexico, you see on the movies, right? All these big cities and all this metropolis and this and that. And then you come, I'm in Chicago. Yeah. So I think, please don't hate me. But I think Chicago is the most beautiful city in the planet.
Yeah.
But then you drive 2 hours away from, and it's rural for ages, and then the next city is like 6 hours away. So it is very paradoxical, as it is having the Kim Kardashians of the world telling people to get up and work. And we still can be, this is something that is really important, that we can still be feminists and we can still be worried about Kim's safety with all the,
Yeah.
I don't follow none of that business, but to see a man building this, like this violence that has been building on.
Yeah.
And you can worry about that woman.
Yeah.
Safety.
Yeah.
And also call her out in her stupidity that, oh, just get up your ass and get to work. Like, that's not the world in which we all live, honey.
No.
But anyway, I'm sure Kim Kardashian and Kanye West cannot give a rat's ass about my opinion, but please. So anyway, being a rebel, being a witch, being a heretic, being a warrior. I don't want to give away the book, of course, but you talk here about how many names you have on the bag and how you have to like pick, right? But before we go into the names that you pick, we're not going to talk about it, all of them, or I will have you here the whole day. But how do you decide to divide it into witches, heretics, and warriors? What is, for people that haven't seen the book, by the way, you need to buy it. But for people that haven't buy it, why that title? Why those three parameters?
It started with the word heretic. Like that word was just in my brain, rattling around, making noise. And, like I said at the beginning, I wasn't raised religious. So the word heretic for me isn't scary. Like there isn't any religious baggage that I have to carry around with that word. And I feel the same way about the word witch, like that. It's not a scary word to me, although sometimes it is nice for people to get scared. I admit that. But, just the idea that anything outside the norm is heretical. Anything outside our cultural standards is heretical. And so the more this concept was rattling around in my head, the more I was like, well, shit, everything in my life is heretical. Everything I do is heretical. I love that. Like, I love being subversive in that way. And so I started thinking about other ways that women really can be heretical, and just that word witch, being a heretic, being a warrior. Like culturally across the globe, women have been warriors since the dawn of time. But in our modern age, we don't really think about that. Like, the men were the knights, the men were the ones fighting, the men's were the warriors. And that's a very slim amount of history. It's not the bulk of it. So I started really kind of going into these three subtitles or subcategories, I guess. And then, like you said, I had a very long list of potential badasses to include. And it just took some winnowing and sitting with and praying to see like who is right, who wants to be included in this, who wants to step forward for their name to be listed. And that was a long process. Yeah, a lot of ancestral prayer and work.
I love it. And I love how you explain, like, what is this, what is that, what is the other, like, and how you can or not identify with all of them.
Yeah.
There's something pretty cool also that is in the book for y'all who's gonna run and buy it. You recommend people to just open the book in whichever chapter, and use even more magic, but I don't want to give it all away. So I can tell you which ones I picked to talk about today.
Okay.
But if you want to talk about them, that's fine. And if you want to leave it as a mystery. But the very first one that caught my eye, obviously, was Circe. I know how to say in Spanish, hechicera, but sorceress.
Yes.
Why Circe?
So she is actually the reason this whole book exists.
What?
Yeah, like it was. So, Circe is the only mythical woman in this book. Every other woman in the book was a human. I don't know that Circe wasn't human. I can't prove that one way or the other, but she is mythological. And I have a relationship with her as a deity or a spirit, however you might want to define her. And she, to me, is the epitome of those three words. She is a witch, she is a heretic, and she is a warrior. And I was, is it Magdalene? I can't remember her last name, but she wrote a book called Circe. It's a fictional book but it's almost like Circe's telling of her mythology. That book is beautiful and inspirational and powerful, and that I listened to it. The woman who reads the audiobook has a beautiful melodious voice. It's like being in trance listening to this book. And I just couldn't stop thinking about Circe. And I was like, can I write a whole book about Circe? And then it became really clear that she is a one representation and that there are others. And so she was really the catalyst for the other women showing up.
That is so amazing that she was one. Magdalene Miller is the author.
That's it.
Speaking of that, I noticed some people that you mentioned here by name that inspire you, because they are the heretics over time. They are the magical warriors. But there are two names that jump at me, obviously. And there's one that I'm surprised that is not here.
Yeah.
But you mentioned, obviously, we are not worthy, Gloria Steinem.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned Brené Brown.
Yeah.
Why are those women important? And for anybody who lives under a rock and don't know who those two are, why is it important that they get to know them?
Yeah. So, Gloria Steinem did a lot for the feminist movement. She was out there, with a target on her back, saying the things that people didn't want to hear, right? So she did a lot for the feminist movement and just women's rights in general. Brené Brown is, Gloria Steinem's not gone, like she's still here and present and doing the things, but you can really see more of her impact from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? Like that was like when the wheels started really turning for women. Brené Brown is more of a modern voice, right? And she talks about vulnerability. And there's this way that some of the like feminist movement, especially in the 80s and a little bit into the 90s, was like, well, the way we get equality is to act just like men. And I don't think that is the best approach. And so Brené Brown doesn't necessarily say don't act like men, but she says being vulnerable is powerful. And we've been told that that's not true. Being vulnerable is weak. And I don't like that. Being vulnerable is powerful. And so Brené Brown is like the champion of that. Like, be authentic, be vulnerable, make mistakes. It's good for you, So I feel like her voice is a modern awakening to being a powerful human.
Yeah. I love how they impact her work, and it's just beautiful. But I'm gonna pick another name.
Yeah.
And I was surprised. Oh, but before we're gonna tie those two. The devil.
Yeah.
Why are we witches so against talking about the devil? And I know you don't talk about it, but you do. So
yeah.
why was it important that you tap into the devil?
So, when you say the word witch to someone who doesn't know anything about witchcraft or paganism or Wicca, there's an assumption that the devil is involved. And I've been noticing in the modern witchcraft movement more accepting of, yes, we work with the devil, we work with Lucifer, we work with the horned god. And I'm finding that really fascinating. Yeah. That's not an entity that I have a personal relationship with, like the quote unquote, the devil or Lucifer. But I'm meeting a lot more practitioners who are calling themselves, traditional witches or trad witches that work with this entity of Lucifer. And I think it's important to acknowledge, let's not hide from these things. Yeah, there you go. Let's not pretend that he's not around. Let's not pretend that, it's all love and light. There is something that is mysterious and dangerous and subversive about witchcraft that should feel scary. So let's talk about it. Let's be open about it.
Now that you mentioned love and light, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but because I want to get so much, I remember something that you put on the book, that how damaging is when people utilize psychological terms.
Yeah.
Like run of the mill. That is, you don't know me, but now you're gonna know. That is my biggest pet peeve.
Yeah.
Because I love psychology. I love Jungian psychology. I am not a psychologist myself, but I've studied a lot of psychological terms and
Yeah.
work. And I also collect psychologists as friends. Or some of my best
Nice.
friends are all psychologists. So I really, it really is one of my pet peeves when people talk about like, oh, let's come and heal your inner child in a 3-hour seminar. And I'm like, it's not
Right.
going to happen.
Right.
Why is it so important that we unpack all this? I don't want to label it as anything but, you know, I don't want to use the word fluffy. I don't want to say love and
Yeah.
lighters, but you know,
Yeah.
it's kind of, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
How can we like get past that once and for all and just do the work?
Yeah. I mean, it's like acknowledging that our personal stuff is not going to get worked out in a 3-hour workshop, right? Like the damage and trauma and life experiences that we have from our past until the present moment make us who we are. And it's good and bad and ugly and beautiful, right? And so we have the rest of our lives moving forward from this point to unpack that and figure it out and understand what makes us tick. And understanding, like, you know, the one that really gets me is the use of the word trigger. I feel like that word has really been watered down. And so it's like, oh, I don't like the color orange, I'm triggered by it. No, you just don't like it. It's not a trigger. You just don't like it. Like we tend to soften and take the edge off of things culturally, you know? And so, yeah, that one really irks me, but you're not going to figure all your stuff out in a one-day workshop. You might get some huge enlightenments. You might get some major epiphanies. You might start to figure out like, oh my gosh, that one moment has actually stuck with me for 20 years. Wow, maybe I need to do some healing around that. But it's not just going to happen like that. And I think, you know, we're also a capitalist society. So we want the thing now, we want it now, we want it now. And now is not how life works.
No.
It's hard and sticky and challenging and beautiful and awe-inspiring. And it's all of those things. And so it takes time. And, you know, the thing I know all witches experience this is, you know, I encourage people to do self-work, whatever that looks like. And you might think like, oh, I dealt with that issue. It's solved. I'm healed. And then all of a sudden it rears its ugly head again. But hopefully, if you've been doing the work, if you've been processing your stuff, if you've been looking at the things that make you tick, the next time it rears its ugly head, you're better equipped to deal with it and it doesn't spin you out, right? So I think it's this desire to have things now. I think it's this desire for us to just like self-diagnose and, you know, like be like, I understand that. I know why I'm triggered, but it's all surface. We need to get deeper than the surface.
Exactly. Yeah. And you all know, if you listen to my podcast enough, you know, I'm an advocate for therapy and not just only doing the witch things and not just only religion. You won't come to a witch for a legal issue. So why come to the priest for a medical issue? And I have to read the famous Carl Jung, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That's one of my favorite quotes in the world. So speaking of quotes and mythical beings, this heretic that I was so surprised to see her on the side of the heretics, Mary Magdalene. What? You know, because, and I'm going to tell you why, because I grew up in Mexico, who's Catholic. I know I'm going to do the joke. You know, I can make the joke because I'm Mexican. You cannot make the joke. If you're not Mexican, don't do it. Mexico is the most pagan country in the world.
Right.
Don't tell the Mexicans. They think they're Catholic. Let's leave them alone. So as a Mexican witch, which is basically paganism, to see Mary Magdalene as a heretic, I was like, wait, what? Yeah. It really surprised me. Why does she fit with the heretics?
Well, if you think about just like historically, right? Like take religion and any stuff that's going to bubble up around that, because I know that will for folks. But just think from a historical perspective, what was happening in that part of the world at the time that Jesus was doing his preaching? And like, Jesus was a heretic, right? Like he was preaching things that got him murdered. And whatever story you believe about Mary Magdalene, whether she was a disciple or she was his lover or she was his wife, like we're never going to know the truth. So whatever your truth is fine with me. But whatever she was in that spectrum was heretical. Not only that, she was one of the very few number of women that traveled with this band of men. How nuts was that at that time of the world, in that part of the world, for only a handful of women, really only 2 women, likely only her, that was traveling with 13 dudes through the desert to preach and heal and spread the gospel of love? Like, that is heretical. That is like, people would have been thinking she was mentally ill. Like, you don't leave the comfort of your family. You don't not get married. You don't not do all of these things. And, you know, the stories that she may have been a prostitute, whatever, like that's likely been debunked by most historians. But even if she was, that was heretical. Like everything about her life was dangerous, literally, not just like, I'm going to protest this thing, but my beloved was murdered because he said these things. That's a big freaking deal. And so she's an absolute heretic. Absolute.
Yes, absolutely. And I love, so I know we've been talking about this characters, this historical women and this mythological women.
Yeah.
But there is more than just their stories in this book. You teach us here how to wake up that archetype within ourselves.
Yeah.
So tell us, without giving the whole book away, obviously, tell us a little bit about how you work, or how do you recommend that the work that is within the book is applied to people's practice?
So, you know, the bulk of my background in witchcraft is connected to the reclaiming tradition of witchcraft. And in reclaiming, it is a lot about self-work, knowing thyself, understanding your stuff, getting therapy, you know, getting medical help, like doing the things to make you a whole and complete person. And so that's the foundation of how I show up as a witch. So that is a lot of what this book is. Like, look at Mary Magdalene, and what do you find inspiring about her? What do you find that something about the way she lived her life could improve your life? And then here are some ways to incorporate that. So connecting with her as like an ancestor or a spiritual ally, doing these different exercises to awaken some of the energetics that she was likely working with in her time and place. There are ways, like we could do this with any being ever, right? It's just, I specifically named these 9 entities in this book, but you could point to any ancestor, any mythological being, any historical figure that you respect or appreciate or are inspired by, and look at ways you can incorporate their energetic into your practice. And I feel like that makes us stronger practitioners, right? If we're just kind of going about with blinders on and focusing on our little road, we're only going to grow so much. But if we can widen our perspective and connect with other people of different backgrounds and faiths and practices, we will grow exponentially and have a much better understanding of who we are as an individual.
Absolutely. And as we are about to conclude, not only this show, the time has flown. I mean, we still have a few minutes, but we're about to conclude Women's Month. And, you know, in the rest of America, the continent, not the United States, people don't talk about celebration yet because there's very little to celebrate, right? I'm talking about the Women's History Month. We're still fighting. There's still a lot of warriors in Central and South America, Mexico, and other Spanish-speaking countries. And I love how you talk about diversity and getting to know each other, because, you know, people from Mexico and South America that were getting mad at, what do you mean about celebrate? We don't celebrate. Well, here in the United States, we celebrate, we commemorate. And just by bridging that gap and understanding each other and listening to each other, not answering to defend yourselves. I, for one, as a bilingual person, I love to explain to the people who speak Spanish, like, hey, because they're commemorating this, and that, and I know you're not celebrating, you're observing.
Yeah.
But I mean, something as simple as that bridges this huge gap between white feminism and feminism of people of color, and it's so simple. You can just come together and talk about it. Phoenix, I want to talk so much about this book. I really want to keep talking about it, but I don't want to give it away. So I'm going to ask you. There was a huge bag of names, and there were names that were left out.
Yeah.
Whom was left out that you want to talk about right now?
So the one human that I have, like, this is not one of my ancestors, but I feel like she is. Like, I have been obsessed with this woman for many years, is Sojourner Truth. And she's an African-American woman. She fought the law and won. There's a whole poem about that she wrote. It's a speech that she gave that's very famous. I really wanted her to be in this book. I really did. And she is, because she is so connected to my heart. But I really also wanted to make sure that there was, a wide range of culture represented. And I already had enough like American culture in here. And so I decided to keep her out. But, like 3 of my books have been dedicated to Sojourner Truth. Like, she is like the ultimate badass feminist that's ever existed on the planet. So that is the one that I'm kind of like, oh, could I have done like a little write-up of her, or just blow her a kiss or something, because she's so inspiring.
Maybe she needs her own book. Do you think there will be a second book?
It's possible. You're not the first person to ask me that, so now I'm like, I could see that happening. That would be fun. It was fun to write.
It is a wonderful book. And this is not a secret for my listeners. They all know that I read very slowly. I'm more of an oral tradition person, and I love to learn by hearing. I couldn't put this one down.
No, thank
which
you.
is, coming humbly from a person who has to book time to read the book. And this one was one of the ones that I was like, oh yeah, it's 2:00 in the morning. No, I need to read another chapter.
Oh.
It's really a good book. Which is Heretics and Warrior Woman by Phoenix LeFae, obviously by Llewellyn. What haven't I asked you that we need to know?
I don't know. I'm not sure how to answer that question. I'm rarely struck speechless. I don't know.
All right. Well, where can one find this wonderful book?
Yeah, I mean, you can buy it anywhere online. Go support your local bookstores if you can. If you go to my website, phoenixlefae.com, you can connect with other books that I've written and the classes that I offer, and also at my shop, I sell the book, obviously, so you can connect with it that way too. If you want a signed copy, you can definitely order it through me, and I'm happy to do that.
I'm gonna have to get to know you in person so you can sign my book.
Yeah, I love that.
And speaking of, after today, as Women's Month ends, after March 28th.
Yeah.
What classes, what presentations, where are you going to be going? What's happening?
Yeah, I'm still a little slow with the public stuff, because of COVID, obviously. So there's not a lot booked right now. I'm doing a thing, the Witches Confluence in October, but that's a long ways away. I'm doing in April a 3-week spell crafting class on Zoom. In April, I'm doing a 1-night money and abundance magic, because I love to talk about money and abundance magic. It's one of my favorite topics. So that's happening in April as well. And then I'm taking a couple of months off of teaching, because I usually have at least 1 workshop going a month, but all of that's on my website. So if you're curious about the different offerings I have, you can see that there.
Of course. And that is www.phoenixlefae.com.
Yes.
And I, for one, want to say I'm very happy that I got to meet you. I love your work. Well,
Thank
this
you.
is the only work that I know by you. I'm eager to now get to know the others that you wrote. And I'm very happy that you kind of like put the cherry on top for Women's Month with this wonderful book.
Awesome.
I like to recommend everybody, don't be afraid of these words. They're just words, but they have so much power. Put them on your soul. It's fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Phoenix, for being on the show tonight. It
Thanks
has
for
been really
having me.
a pleasure. And I leave you the microphone so you can say goodnight to your audience tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for watching, listening, however it is you're participating. Thanks for having me on. I had so much fun chatting with you, and I look forward to circling with people in person in the coming months of the year.
Absolutely. We all are looking forward to that. Oh my goodness. May the divine give us health, wealth, abundance, prosperity, but more than anything, safety to go back into the real world. And as a way of saying goodbye, I want to invite you all to continue tuning in into Lunatic Mondays for April. We have Miriam La Gorda Feminista on Spanish on April 4th. We will have To Their Birth on April 11th. We're going to have a social justice series special talking about Earth Day with Jake Bradley and yours truly. Guess what? Byron Ballard is coming to our show on April 25th. So come and get the tea because we're going to be talking about everything. And of course, we're going to have Paganos del Mundo on Spanish with Christine Ortiz, Monica Gobin, Harwood Tuileva, Patricia Finkler, and yours truly. I will be interviewing in Spanish Daphne La Hechicera. She wrote a book and she's bilingual. So she's coming later on the year to talk about her book in English, but I cannot get past. I'm going to invite her to speak Spanish and have an interview for Paganos del Mundo towards the end of the month. Just to invite you all to continue listening to over 700 hours of podcasts on CSNP, the Circle Sanctuary Network podcast. We have Selena Fox on Sundays and Wednesdays with Nature Mystic and Nature Spirituality. We have 2 Tuesdays a month Circle Talk with Deborah Rose. 2 Thursdays a month we have David and Janet Ewing with Moon Magic, and the 3rd Friday of the month we have Blue Marble with Reverend Charlotte Bear. So listen to CSNP, the Circle Sanctuary Network podcast. And to all who are listening, watching, or whatever at this moment, my name is Laura Gonzalez, and never forget that you are loved. Bye-bye.
And thank you for joining us on the Circle Sanctuary Network podcasts, presented by Circle Sanctuary and produced for all who follow the Nature Center paths. Join us here throughout the week for various programming connecting the community around the world. And please don't forget to watch for updates on the Circle Sanctuary website at www.circlesanctuary.org. And follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/CSN podcasts. We can also be found on your favorite podcast hosting sites, such as iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and others. And until next time, many blessings.